So it begins. Years and years have gone by, and the human being finds himself being human in a world that is slowly becoming unnatural. The title of today's episode is Answers Beyond Sensory Perception. And so Mr. Within would like to dive into the reality of the moment. Personally, it has become clear to me that this world of ours, it is simulated internally, or at least the external phenomena has internal meaning to the human being, and behind our eyes each human being stands in their own world of vision. The world is a changing place, and there's a blessing in that. There's a blessing in change, that whatever you get convinced will in some sense fade through time. There have been moments where I have made snow castles of belief, but the next morning they have all melted. I have had a certain way that I have considered the world to stand, and then I saw the world move differently and I was broken. And this life is very nice. It breaks you a couple times until you see what is actually here. You see, this is what I noticed. I did not have a spiritual perspective or a metaphysical consideration of the world. The surface was enough. The surface kept me occupied for like 20 years. For 20 years, I did not care. I was like many. It's not just me. Like many people, most of their lifetime goes to their obsession of their self. We have had many poets kind of speak beyond the sensory. Vedic scriptures such as the Veda and the Upanishads, they really dive into it deeply. They speak about the notion of the being's core being no longer just an attributed temporal thing, but that the temporary stands within an eternal process. That even though my voice is heard once, the world remembers what it says. Nature extends itself forth just so it gets pushed back to see beyond its edge. In 2019, I don't know how far this talk of mine will echo, but I will say it. In the year 2019, the world is an interesting place, filled with growing technological advancements. A sort of hidden blessing of our species is the intelligence that moves, the rivers of intelligence that move in Silicon Valley. Technology has given us wings, but it has confused us of where to fly to. The world is getting devoured by its ignorance, slowly. Children are born into a program where they can only be pawns in. It's just the nature of the system. The political system will never be as up to date as the citizen. in order to consider all, it must find an average point in the middle. It must consider the best and the worst and kind of be a response to both. However, nowadays I feel it's like ever since idol worship stopped, people moved on to ideal worship, and ideal worship has not stopped since then. And it's kind of primitive and savage. It's savage when you see a human being that is so convinced by their unique ideology that they forget that there's another human being in front of them. There was this award-winning documentary I saw that it was a great film in regards to how the director had created a film, but the storyline it was about it was the documentary called Skin, if I'm correct, something Skin, and in this documentary there was a scene. Sorry, it wasn't a documentary; it was a film, I believe. And anyways, in this film, in this film there was a moment of chaos, a moment of unimaginable chaos, and it was suggesting a moment where there was this it's the kind of grocery store scene where this how can I say it? It's a scene of great discrimination, where this black gentleman is in some sense broken and taken to the verge of death by these racist people. And for me, it's the strength of the cultural program. That means some cultures, their cultural program has been pushed back as if their pride was too much and it was broken by the hands of history. I saw the chaos of belief. I have seen it not just in Western countries, but I have seen it in Eastern countries. I have seen around this world that we are literally, like, if you see people on the street, it's codes of language and the belief just moving through their mind. And trust me, anybody who studies language will suddenly have the subjective realm become transparent to them. In that transparency, they will come to abiding with the experience of their moment. They will be experientially inspired. If I told you there is a kid, let's compare two types of people now. There's a person who intellectually feels they know everything. The guy feels like they're the professor of the moment. And we see, and we also see, imagine, a person who he's not caring about the conceptual existence of the world, but the person is following the excitement of the moment, regardless of its foolishness or not. You see, we have to make a decision as beings. Do we want the experiential reality to advance, or do we want the conceptual, symbolic skin of the experiential reality to advance? You know, there's a regret that many people have on their deathbeds that did I really live? Did I really live? In my dreams, I've had a couple dreams where I've died in the dreams. And it's been very unique because I woke up in the morning and I'm like, wow, that was like an unnecessary dream to have, you know. But what I understood was that the death of my body is the death of my ideology, but my ideology has been dying and resurrecting endlessly since my existence, since my birth in this plane of existence. But one thing hasn't changed. Amongst all the conceptual turbulence, something that has been navigating from the beginning of my birth till now has not changed, and I was under the impression that it had to have an attribute. I was looking for the shape of truth in a world where shapes always change. Do you see the flaw? Do you see the flaw of the spiritual search? I say there are two traps of the subjective realm. One of them is the nihilistic trap, and the other is the enlightenment trap. Because both of them have accepted the extreme in a changing world, which can never be extreme. Some problems are from your environment. Literally, if you relocate to a different environment, your problems will cease to exist. There are things that are moving towards you. They are how the world is happening to you. But some problems are based on how you are happening to the world, how you are opening your eyes to the meaning of the moment. And it's very easy to have our emotions make the animal instinct decide. You know, an emotional person is just a little bit higher than an animal. But a person who witnesses their emotions and their thoughts and comprehends the role of the actor of the elemental forces, you see, our questions are in the sense in our sensory perception. It is very rare that globally the species will acknowledge a question that has nothing to do with manifest form. Only philosophers and certain poets have dared to go that far. And mystics, of course, they lived in that world. A mystic is a person who, you see, a person who's not a mystic, you can say the common man chooses to live in a world of knowledge. The common man chooses to know things. The uncommon man is paying attention to what they do not know. There's a different value there. You know, most people think they get liberated by what they come to know. Sometimes you get liberated by what you come to not know. You see in the flaw of how your eyes defined the world, there was another way it moved. You see a crack in the mirror of the existence of the moment, ideologically. This one phenomena, you can say, the presence of the moment is the only unchanging witness. So it's kind of strange. Through objective and subjective means, a watching moment has been continuing on. We have this poet from 700 years ago by the name of Rumi, Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi, this Persian poet. He said this next level thing. He said, I have lived on the edge of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on a door. The door opens. I have been knocking from the inside. What that means is this dude went to solve his external existential problem only to realize the meaning of it was coming from within. Because what is within you cannot be named. It is the observer of the name. What is within you cannot be shaped. It is the observer of the shape. And what is within you cannot be changed, because it is the observer of the change. Any moment, it doesn't matter what program you're in. It doesn't matter what cultural program you have, what linguistic program you have. It doesn't matter what way you're categorizing the image, in what way you're cutting up the cake. You know, you can say the whole moment is like the whole cake, but we cut it up into conceptions. No longer the moment is just a moment. The moment is a certain moment in history. It's in a certain place. There's certain stuff in that place. And the more we zoom into the world, the more we have no choice but to infinitely dismantle it. So it's as if there have been some philosophers that have challenged the scientific institution, going up to scientists. These people have said, listen, man, if you're cutting up the thing endlessly and you are naming it, so it's kind of like hollow from the beginning. As if we created language and we believe it to be the only thing. And so we have become ignorant of the experiential realities. Language is an experiential reality, but it's indirect. It's in your subtler planes of abstraction and imagination. This is why my whole consideration, I looked in this life and I'm like, okay, what kind of, listen to what I'm saying here, what kind of profession, what kind of way of living attains the most success? And I thought you had to be a tough person. When I was younger, I had these sorts of unique inner struggles, you know? Where I wanted to, I was like, okay, so we're in a world where it's like, you know, Darwin says survival of the fittest, there's challenges, there's death, da-da-da-da-da, you gotta be a kind of juggernaut and go through. I had that mentality, but I missed out on a lot with having that mentality. mentality. You cannot act like a machine and expect not to forget your humanity. You cannot act like a machine. You cannot, the thing is, because we get defined by our environment, I want you to consider a sort of subjective environment going on. Now the subjective environment tends to loop if your belief is a solid, unchanging conviction. What that means is, this is my hilarious, this is what was so hilarious to me. People are, a belief is an attention on a symbol. And a belief is an attention that that symbol is more powerful and true than all the changing phenomena of the world. You see, it's as hollow as realizing you could have been named anything on this planet. You could have had any name, and that name would just work fine. So in some sense, out of nowhere symbology can be assigned and the world still turns. But this is the difference between the common man and the uncommon man. The common man gives in to the program. The common man's like, okay, it's too hard to change. It's too big. It's too ancient. You know, what can we do about it? All right, let's just go with the show and play the best game we can. That is not enough. That was enough 50 years ago. It is not enough now. And the educational system will acknowledge an apocalypse. This is one of those things Mr. Within is saying globally. Every educational system, any intelligence that is using the technology of language will eventually find a hollowness. I'm writing this giant science fiction novel called The Messenger of Giants, and in it, I've just decided to write one giant novel that any sort of kind of scope I've had of the future kind of is in it, you know. So in this novel, The Messenger of Giants, I've created a setting where there's this philosopher. And by the way, the story is set in the year 5025, and there's 9 parallel dimensions to the world, to Earth, you know. So people think, you know. So what happens? There's this philosopher. He has become immortal through the advancement of technology, and the whole chapter is this philosopher writing. And in his writings, he's saying how the moment the human being became immortal, then philosophers had to endure the chaos and the order that would come from their belief, from their words. You see, this life is kind of a performance thing. You go performance, you go act on stage when you come into consciousness in the wakeful state of being. And after you have acted, you will eventually at some point die, but the influence of how intensely you lived and not just only existed, the intensity of your living will echo. It will either echo into collective ears or individual ears. To be honest, there came a time where I lost a lot of these talks I've given. I lost like 300 of them, 300 hours of these kind of lectures I've given. And then when that moment happened, it was very fascinating, because every action you do builds something in you. Every action that's kind of comes across your mind is positive. It adds something to you. So a good person has as much of an ego as a bad person, but the good person, their ego has been able to be more content with the world because there's less intense shift. So both the good person and the bad person have egos, which means they're both in illusions. But one illusion doesn't help the collective, and the other illusion helps the collective. This is why good is better than bad, but what is better than good is neither good or bad. You know, the yin-yang symbol can testify. The circle encompasses all of it. The yin-yang symbol, it's not truly comprehended by people, its magnitude. What it is saying in one moment of being, chaos and order are the way the world is moving. Chaos is the extreme of emptiness. Order is the extreme of fullness. These extremes It's as if one aspect of your mind has been given a command to eternally continue. As if even if you die, you will not believe your death, your own death, as a being, as a conscious moment. So a part of your mind is an eternal echo, but a part of your mind is that it has to do with fading. That means, so I was saying the kind of profession I saw that holds it all is the pilot. I acknowledge all my audience as advanced communicators and pilots, every human being, to be honest, because we are navigating our consciousness. This is why I say the pilots of consciousness. You are navigating your attention into worlds that manifest in accordance to your free will's effort. Henry David Thoreau, this American poet, he says, "It is not what you're looking at that matters. It is what you see." And we have Jonathan, sorry, not Jonathan Swift. I'm gonna share some quotes with you right now. Will Durant. Let me first share this. Jonathan Swift has this quote where he says, "Vision is the art of seeing what is invisible to others." And then we have Will Durant say, Jonathan Swift said that. Will Durant said, "Knowledge is the eye of desire and can pilot the soul," something like that. Kind of, he's suggesting that the more you know, the more your free will can navigate. Just realistically, the pilot sees more of the environment, so has more of a sense of what is happening in the environment. I think what is superior to the intellect is alertness, because intellect seeks conviction. The intellect requires solid grounding. You cannot be a logical and rational person unless there is a fixed, unchanging foundation of your original premise. You see, the life is like, just like how the planet has an axis, everybody's inner reality, everybody's subjective life has an axis. And its access, it's certain conceptions that had to be accepted as the world first. So trust me, the child is creating the world in its mind, then is extracting the world in accordance to the objective and subjective self. That means who you are right now is not purely thought, and it is not purely matter. It is a combination of just phenomenology that is being witnessed, and then decisions are made. You see, there was this hilarious kind of thing where they said back in the day, some people you would speak to, your words would go from one ear inside their like right ear and leave their left ear. Like they would not hear the idea, even if the sounds entered their ear. The reason they said that is because attention dictates clarity, not intellect, not subjective sophistication. Your attention is how you pilot your consciousness. When you study your attention, you come back to yourself. When you come back to yourself, just like Zen Master Dogen says, to study he's saying like to somebody, to study Buddha's way, you must forget the self. And to forget the self, you must study the self. And to study the self is to forget the self. And to forget the self is to awaken to the nature of all things. So how is it that in forgetting of the self, you awaken to the nature of all things? The self is a subjective constitution of reality. As your attention lifts from the subjective constitution of reality, its relationship with objectivity changes. Right now, I'm sitting in this moment. Trust me, the mind has a capacity to infinitely make hell out of the moment and infinitely make heaven. But eventually, it will get tired of its inauthenticity. This is why no human being, even if they try, you cannot by nature lie too long. You get tired because it's another action. It's as if they said liars have to remember many versions of themselves. That means like the guy's a different person to every person he talks to, because he lacks the recognition that it's okay to be natural. It's okay to be alive. It doesn't have to have such a purpose that makes people use a bridge the wrong way. The main purpose, at least biologically speaking, is that you have no living being has ever been in this evolutionary position, and it's an opportunity of a lifetime to see how the species moves mountains. Subjectively, your free will doesn't have to follow anybody's voice. I say this. I say the best thing that the teacher can be is a mirror. That's it. The teacher is not meant to program the child. This is what I did not like about the educational system. They did not even care to see how the child had understood what the teacher had taught. That means it's as if like the educational system is a bunch of minds looking at one mind, rather than that one mind trying to motivate each. It's like, how can I tell you? I think the educational system, it is a very beautiful theatrical performance, but it is not really an educational system. It is just a survival system. You learn not because you want to know, but because you want to pass to the next level. The educational system is a video game. And what have we been all told, by older generations? Stop playing video games. Walk in the real world that is accessible. The mystics, it's hilarious. The mystics felt the world was a simulation, was a temporary simulation of an eternal being. Pretty much ancients believed we are the thoughts of God. We are God's imagination that has manifest. The ancients believed this. But the modernity now looks at the situation and says, how deeply do we want to look in the world when we have to, in some sense, take into account we have 8 billion travelers on this planet. Travelers, we're temporary in regards to our physicality. So when you visit a place, you want to, when you go on a journey, on a trip, you want to have a good accommodation, So 8 billion human beings, the greatest thing that the governance of their civilization can do is open doors for them that they could not imagine could be open. That is when people, when they can't wait to open their eyes. The way the world is now, people can't wait to just get home and close their eyes from the turmoils of the day. But imagine a world coming soon. Cinematically coming soon. That the person goes to sleep, and when he's gone to sleep, he's smiling. He smiles and his eyes close, and after he awakens from his slumber, the smile remains. The person cannot wait to live in the world. But the issue is people cannot wait to die in this world because the system is inefficient. And suffering, rather than being reduced, is to be maximized. The reason is because the civilization's governance, this, I could say this globally, is acknowledging that the person is a perfect individual. We have a certain image of the perfect citizen, not taking into account the inner structure of the individual. The inner of the structure of the individual could not match the outer requirement. The reason we as human beings get old is to take into account that we have to create a multidimensional system of sustenance. You have to realize external reality is a multidimensional place. Inner reality tends to be a singular place. But the singularity of the inner reality is unknown and empty, but the infinity of the outer reality is known and endless. Known and infinite. And it's very obvious. You want proof? Just look at the billions of trillions of stars in our universal sector. External reality is vast and endless. And if we wanted to take into an average. There's no scientist that can index the whole cosmos to even come up with a formula. The chaotic thing is language was made in the same way fire was. We took stuff and we made it into something. And even before there was speech, certain scholars of language, stretching from Steven Pinker to Noam Chomsky, they've wondered about the place of language. They have considered that there has been meaning before, in some sense, communication. Sorry, not before communication, meaning before language. That means the guy would just be like, ugh, like the caveman would make a noise like that, ugh, and the other caveman would just notice something. It's as if it was just like a meaningless sound, not collectively acknowledged as a language, but it had meaning. And this is something cool to know. This is something where I haven't seen professors of language speak about, but I think it has to be taken into account. It is the idea that mathematical language came first before any sort of linguistic, like normal language, you can say. Mathematical language, it's as if there requires to always be a mathematical evolution, a mathematical kind of update, even revolution, socially speaking, and then there comes something new happening to language. Because we need the separation. That space between the words is suggesting you need to have a mathematical ability of acknowledging. So I find that language's next evolutionary leap, is geometric. This is my personal kind of vision. I feel geometry is the next great language of all languages. We're going to realize that it's kind of unique. The Abrahamic religion said first was the word. What that means is first was the design, the seed planted in. It's like the seed of knowledge planted in the unknown. I've had walks in nature. And in those walks, I have realized how much we don't know as people, where we are. There's a brilliance to nature. And my whole vision is, I understand that technology is cool AF. But it comes at a cost. The more we build tools that, it's like rather than us evolving and needing less tools, we are making more sophisticated tools and we ourselves are less evolving. An evolutionary return to nature will happen. It will start on an individual scale to any being who moves beyond the language threshold. You unchain your mind from how language has forced you to see it a certain way. You don't have to always be words, To people, there's no choice, of course. When you're at a job interview, you better speak well. But in reality, there's many moments of solitude with oneself. This is why back in the day, like think about it, like they had these distant towns and people would for days go on these caravan journeys to get to the other town. And this is why the Middle East has a sort of strange kind of hospitality. I was born in Iran and like at the age of 7 came to Canada. But like I've been there in the summers, kind of meeting like relatives and whatnot, and I could tell you this: hospitality is taken as a big consideration, and if we go to that back in the day context, the village would suddenly have new travelers, new minds, new stories, new data enter the system. If you treat everybody as a guest in the house of existence, then there will come a sort of naturalness, a strange naturalness, where you have understood your mind cannot own the world. There's a strange freedom and empowerment in that. When you stop trying to put the world in a language box, in boxes of language, you get access to your raw presence, and then life becomes extremely, at least for me, it became very playful. I was torn by the chaos of a strict truth. You can say the greatest freedom is an efficient freedom. And we can say that the greatest efficiency is a solution that can be applied to all, and that all can apply it to themselves. That means we want to create a civilization with a foundation kind of blueprint model that is choosing efficiency over inefficiency, but is realizing the value of efficiency is natural. I had a very unique thing happen the other day. You know, I tend to talk a lot about nature in these talks, but very strangely, like I was in Canada, like I live in Toronto, and there's Tim Hortons here, and I was outside of Tim Hortons, and I was on my phone sending a message to someone, right? And while I was there, this old man comes out of Tim Hortons with this, large coffee, and he comes out and he sees me on the phone, and instantly, just some, like, as if he has no kind of polite restriction in his mind, he just looks at me and he's like, "Get off that phone!" And I was so busy typing, actually. To be honest, it was hilarious. I wasn't acknowledging him for a second, right? Like he was there, but I had to send the message quick. It was like an important message, and and he looks at me, and there's this thing, and I'm like, "Hey man, I gotta send this message." And he's like, he says, I don't remember the exact words, but he says something about, like, "Don't use your phones." Like he's kind of damning technology, you know. And I remember when I say I'm sending a message, he's like, "Talking, talking, talking," and he leaves. But it was incredible, because I realized in that man, he had seen the future of technology too early. That man had a sort of wisdom in his eyes. He meant that the natural ways that our ancestors and civilization have continued are now being under the attack of countercultures that are being more arrogant to nature. We feel having the most solid, alpha ego is you're the victorious, A king that only wants to wear the crown is no king at all. A king that wears the crown because he sees that crown can one day be on the heads of all the people that are there. It's as if a king that builds a kingdom that is inspiring kings is a true king. You will see. You will live for yourself for at max, like, I don't know, I think 50, 60, or let's say 65, 70 years you will live for yourself. You will live with some ego, with some toughness of an idea, and you'll continue. You'll play the games of this life with your subjective Iron Man suit, whatever way your belief system has shaped it. But you will step out of this suit to breathe the fresh air. And of course, Tony Stark and Iron Man, he must have definitely thought about the technology inside the suit of how it preserves the air. So he must have had some advanced technology, which, thinking about it now, doesn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense. Yo, the Iron Man suit doesn't make sense. Sorry guys, I don't know why I'm really diving into this, but if the man needs oxygen, that means there must be certain holes, or he must carry big oxygen tanks inside the suit. But if the suit is open, if there are holes in the suit, Tony Stark will go underwater and the water will fill his suit. Unless the technology closes the ducts. Yeah, okay, no, the suit makes sense. Okay. Anyways. Um, I feel our lives will have individual value at first, and eventually we will see the greatest individual is a collective effort. We will begin not trying to change the old world because they are too stubborn, to honest. You cannot sell a more natural world to the way unnatural ways our ancestors have behaved. Okay, you cannot sell it. They won't buy it. They don't care. There are many. How can I say it? Um, Just a second, guys. What you can do is, rather than trying to change the dimension, create a new dimension. Rather than trying to change the old, create something new. And this is something where, to be honest, it's really important to be in parental psychology, and even, I would say, Middle Eastern parental psychology. The thing is, you have to give freedom to certain aspect of your moment of being. And if you don't give that freedom, you're going to strangely feel you don't deserve freedom. When you take freedom, you see, when what violence is taking away freedom. When when you look at the news and you see like a report on deaths of a tragic incident, violent incident, you know what you see? You see it's as if their freedom to exist has been gone. That's even what war was. The person was like a great artist or a great doctor or a great engineer or some great like person in society, but then war came. And of course, there is unjustified wars and there's justified wars. For justified wars, there was no. It's as if, how do I say it? You have to defend your home, but at the same time, you must get rid of the blindness that makes that. It's all about a sort of freedom of being and freedom of doing. The civilization must focus on helping people be more free to do things, but do things in ways that it does not disrupt the progress of others. And that's very hard to do. This kind of civilization I'm speaking about, maybe let's give it like, I don't know, maybe I'll be an old, I don't know. But I don't know. Let's just put this out there. I feel in 10 years there's going to be a shift like this, where we will see the chaos. It's as if we will see the giant we're building, in which its truths are going to crush us. And that giant is how technology will no longer listen to when technology no longer listens to your free will. Many people are afraid of the world ending, not realizing the world ends every night you sleep. The story of it ends. Then you wake up. More than us thinking of birth and death, the mind awakens to the manifest and suddenly goes to sleep to the manifest. I'll tell you this, in one of my dreams where I died in the dream, there was a strange feeling. It's as if something had changed, but nothing had still changed. That's how the death felt. In the dream, of course. This is a dream I'm speaking about. I'm currently alive. But how alive is our species, I don't know. And it's so easy not to care about it. There have been many times where wealth has whispered in my ear, has brought, like literally you see in movies, they're trying to lure the guy in by bringing like the food in front of his nose, and his nose just follows the food and goes. You know, I've been lured into, I have been convinced by chaos many times. Many times. Many times I have felt my existence did not deserve to be here. But something strange happened. The seasons passed and the days changed, and tears and laughter reminded me I am never the same. I am watching my existence as if I am walking in an art gallery that seems to be a miracle of elemental forces. A miracle that our planet is not so close to the sun to burn and is not so far that it is too cold to be alive. Our planet is enough, is in a position astronomically that we can have history. History bows to its astronomical position of the planet. And it's really unique. To be honest, there's endless unexplored worlds, you know? You can update anything by just caring for it. However, there is this consideration that there is a subconscious mind, and that subconscious mind holds beliefs that constantly bring about emotions that limit the conscious to the belief of the subconscious. Your subconscious is, the veil to the subconscious is torn by confronting fear and desire. If you still have fear, fear is a sort of desire, believe it or not. And desire is a sort of fear. They're kind of like two sides of the same coin. In fear is when you don't want something. Desire is when you really want something. Fear is when you really don't want something. And that's because the person still thinks they're a thing. They're objectively defined. They think their meaning is only in the eyes of others. There's this very incredible story of this Zen patriarch. I believe he was the 5th patriarch of Buddhism. And Zen Buddhism. And pretty much Bodhidharma goes to Japan. I believe it was Japan. Bodhidharma goes to Japan, and he meets an emperor who has built a lot of Buddhist monasteries and kind of spread Buddhist teachings everywhere. And then the emperor sees Bodhidharma, this everybody knows as if this man's like next level enlightened, and he comes to meet the king. So it's a king, in some sense, speaking to an enlightened person. Bodhidharma looks at the king, who's like, what's the merit? What's the merit in me doing all these good things and like wealthy, kingly stuff for Buddhism? Bodhidharma looks at this man who thinks he's an emperor. And he says, all you have done is foolishness. You're a fool. and he leaves. So Bodhidharma was so next level enlightened, he called the emperor of the time a fool and left. And he was so badass. He left and he went outside of the king's walls, and just his face was right towards the wall, and he started meditating like inches away from the wall. And in later talks and in some other talks, I've discussed why he sat that way. But anyways, it's so his objective distractions are little. Anyways, so what happens is Bodhidharma goes into this meditation, and then the king's like, "What the fuck?" The king is like, "What is this?" You know, and he looks at his right hand man, his like wise councilman, and he says, "What is this? Why do you speak to me that way?" And his wise councilman says, "Sir, the whole point of Buddhist teaching is not to have desire. You looked at this man and you said, what's the merit in it for me? What is the desire for doing all this act?" So his wise councilman tell the emperor that, like, it's not that what you did was bad. You did a good thing for Buddhism, but because you wanted something out of it, that is what made you artificial. And Bodhidharma just like scolded you. The king's like, "Oh shit, okay, I see. The king chills down, goes, has a normal drink with his councilman. Sometimes the wisest counsel of the king are those who can bring the king back to his humanity. To be honest, the family of the king played an important role for the kingdom. Their duty was to take care of the mind, of the inner reality of the king. That is true. That is a true queen. Of course, in our history, the king, the male aspect of our species, has in some sense taken the dominant, has taken the steering wheel. But we are all on the same ride. So this whole thing about political correctness, about certain values, I understand. Of course, society is not up to date. We must update it. But we are in the same journey, you see. So it doesn't matter who wears the crown. It is the kingdom that matters. It is the civilization's advancement and efficiency that matters. Not who holds the steering wheel. Bodhidharma is in meditation. He's gone into what is in Buddhist thought considered as samadhi. And so this samadhi was a state Bodhidharma is in this kind of meditative state where he's being the field of his mind rather than just a kind of body. And so he's in samadhi, in this sort of union of non-dual being. One night, one foggy night, a bewildered man comes to see Bodhidharma, a man who has traveled far. And there's something up with this guy. And he comes to Bodhidharma, and Bodhidharma's just meditating, and he sees that because Bodhidharma is meditating and is held in such high regard, he just quietly sits there waiting for Bodhidharma to wake up from his meditation. And Bodhidharma is in a samadhi. Those things can take timeless. They can be timeless, And so what happens is the guy eventually one night, that foggy night, Bodhidharma suddenly awakens from his samadhi. He awakens from his samadhi, and as he's walking, this man goes to Bodhidharma and says, "Bodhidharma, please, you need to help me, please. Something's up. I can't sleep at night." Like he starts like telling his problem and begging him to, kind of like in a desperate mode, I don't want to say begging, but in a desperate mode, asking Bodhidharma to help him. It's like he has this is his last resort. It doesn't matter what happens. He just needs it to happen. It doesn't matter how it happens. It's just. And so what happens is in the story, this man Bodhidharma is like in such a kind of state where it's as if a manifest phenomena doesn't matter for him. I think at that point, But he looks at it and suddenly ignores the guy, like he doesn't hear the guy, and then the guy does something strange. And this is, I'm not making this up. This is in the Zen story. You know, this is a recorded story, authenticated story. So what happens is that the guy cuts his hand for some reason and holds it in his other hand, and hand in hand in a strange way. He looks at this guy, Bodhidharma, and says, Bodhidharma, this is my sign of loyalty. I will forever follow you, or something. He says something. And then he says, Bodhidharma, please, you have to help. Bodhidharma, suddenly, it's as if the world is asking Bodhidharma's attention to go on this man. And he immediately looks and he says, okay, I will help you. What is your problem? And this is the exact wording of the guy's problem. He says, Bodhidharma, my mind is restless, as if the man hasn't slept for many nights. He's in some sort of inner turmoil. He says, my mind is restless. Please pacify my mind. As if a dying world asking to be saved. And Bodhidharma says, okay, I will pacify your mind, O tormented being. I will pacify your mind. But first, bring your mind in front of me and put it on right on the ground in front of me, and I will pacify it. Bring it right here. And the man gets shocked. The man gets shocked because he wonders. He honestly wonders. He's like, okay, where's my mind? How do I bring this mind that is causing me problems, and all my problems and suffering and turmoils that exist in this mind? Where is it? Bodhidharma is asking me to give it to him, and I can't even find my mind. The man looks at Bodhidharma and he says, I don't know, I can't find it. As if like the apocalypse in the inner egoic apocalypse has already begun. He says, I cannot find it. And Bodhidharma says one of the most badass statements in enlightened wisdom that exists currently. He says, there, your mind is pacified. And suddenly the storms pass, as if Gandalf's fury on Frodo has ended for a moment. Gandalf's compassionate fury. And what happens is that man who's restlessly, endlessly was in this limitless, endless suffering, he realizes the mind is a self-generation, dear listener. It is generated, so live every moment honorably. That's how you enjoy life. Live as if the world cared enough for you to be here, and you care enough for the world to be here. And that is enough. You will pilot advancement for our civilization, whether you know it or not, by just in the back of your heart's eyes. You want the world's heart to keep beating. As if there's a difference in rage. I'm telling you guys. There's a difference in rage. There's a rage that comes when some outer force attacks you, but there's a different rage that comes when the species, the potential efficiency of the species is under attack. Because of what? Because of ignorance. There's this quote I must share. Let me just find it for a second. Just a second, guys. I'm looking for this quote. This is Helen Keller. Just a second, guys. Okay. So, I don't know, like it's too much to explain, but look up who Helen Keller is. She was a woman who, through great adversity, came to see a great clarity in the world. She's in like the Guinness World Records of one of the wisest people ever. You know, and she says, I mean, in my view, of course, she says, keep your face to the sunshine, and you cannot see a shadow. She says security is mostly a superstition. It does not exist in nature, nor do the children of men as a whole experience it. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing. Either your free will has freedom or it's nothing, ladies and gentlemen. And your free will has freedom. You just have to see. It's like Henry David Thoreau said, it's not what you're looking at that matters, it's what you see. So the seer matters. Matter has value to the one that sees it. And the phenomena of seeing seems to be in a dimension separate from the objective, similar to Rene Descartes' mind and body dualism. Because our mind is defined by sight. In the Rig Vedas, they say the mind is a slave to the real. An incredible statement. And if the mind is a slave to the real, that means your imagination is real. But as real, not as real as reality, but reality and imagination, which are generations of your mind, are both real to the witness. Because, and if we had this mentality, right now our civilization freaks out on being temporary and denies eternity. But imagine we were eternal beings. What would our responsibility be? What would our care be? How much would our judgment on others be if we're all eternal? If we are all as far as our species has its eyes open, as long as it has its eyes open. There is so many unexplored avenues of experience, and every generation is given its own program. It's remarkable. And the action of living is the glory of how far the universe has dared to open its eyes. Trust me, when something becomes important, not only do you get energy, you get power. Power of karmic will. It's as if you require enough of an intelligence to see a living world, and then you live for it. In however way the winds of evolution pull you or push you. In however way the winds of evolution lift you. We are individual objective beings. And because we think we're temporary, individual, and objective, our unknown will always be the eternal. In the back of your mind has wanted to never die. So you can say evolution is the eternal urge for a temporary creature to continue. It's endless. You went to measure the sky and you saw no ruler long enough could ever be built. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Just a quick comment on the title. The answers beyond sensory perception means we are only seeking answers in sensory perception. To be honest, our questions also come from sensory perception, but I feel the attention of the being is going through an evolutionary process that has nothing to do with the objective condition. That means our minds are becoming unconditionally present, regardless of how the phenomenology paints the moment, colors the moment. Marcus Aurelius says the soul is dyed with the colors of its thoughts, with the color of its thoughts. And it's just something you see in when you study just a bit of political history, you just kind of see it. You see that stories rule people's lives. And if life is more than a story, then the whole approach will feel void. And humanity's vision is that we are like a candle lit. And this candle, before it fades, it must light up many other things, many other candles. And then when you sleep, you realize you're awake in all that you have done, in all that you have lived for authentically. The mind is the people's mind. Let me tell you what's happening. They're literally, the media is doing something very ridiculous. It's kind of funny. Like, that's why television is always comedic for me. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's the whole concept of the TV is a comedy. In my view, of course. Let me tell you why. Because they are telling you a story of what ability you have, then they're telling you a story of the value your ability has, and then they're telling you a story of where you go for that ability to have value. So it's as if you're getting defined. You're getting defined by the program in some sense. I feel I'm saying the word program too much, in this program. Just a second, I want to read something to you. There's a quote by Terence McKenna. He says, "The idea is not to confront bad ideas, but to come up with good ideas. Otherwise, your enemies define the game and you are the loyal opposition." So it's all about controlling the defining ability and the inner, how your attention attaches to form. Because I feel like, if somebody comes and asks me, "Hey man, are you a soul?" I'll be like, "No, I'm not a soul. I'm my whole moment of being. I am my whole awareness." And who says my awareness has a personality all the time? Who says that when the eyes of a person closes, their intelligence it dies. It dies from the personal into the impersonal, and then the impersonal is somewhere you've always been. So your fears become like distant memories once you are walking on eternal clouds. Rise, mankind. Rise.